Hello folks, welcome to our canal channel Jose. Today we're going to give you an idea how to replace the front struts on a 2007 to 2014 Toyota FJ and a 2003 to 2021 Toyota 4Runner and 2005 to 2015 Toyota Tacoma. This is for a 4x4 system on these vehicles. And for us, the two-wheel drive is pretty similar. So this video is going to guide you and help you a lot as well. But this is for a 4x4. And on the description box, we're going to leave the part numbers that we use for the passenger and driver side from KYB. And the tools that we use, it was an impact gun, which is going to help you a lot, a 90 millimeter socket, a 90 millimeter wrench, a 70 millimeter wrench, a 40 millimeter wrench, and a 12 millimeter socket, and a 12 millimeter wrench as well. But that's the basic stuff that we use, and a guiding pin to when we need to guide the bottom part of the strut where the bolt goes through. So with the system that we're doing, we're removing a little bit more the sway bar. We're removing the splash guard, the sway bar, and the tie rod ends from the steering column. But that way we don't have to get the control arm off to remove the strut, because you got the dry shaft and the sway bar on the front. So it's boxing this component. So the easiest way was the way we're going to show you, and hopefully it works for you and it helps you out. With that said, let's jump right into it. What we have done is we have put jack stands on our truck, took both sides tires off, and what we have done is we have added some WD-40 to the bottom bolt or nut that is going to be holding the strut there. And the upper part is 3 nuts, 1, 2, 3 back there. And we are going to remove our sway bar, so when we pulling out our strut, we have a clearance. And for the lower bolt and nut, we're going to be using a 19 millimeter socket and a 19 millimeter wrench. So to take this bolt out of here, what you're going to have to do is going to have to lean yourself into the suspension and push down into it, so you can slide out the bolt from the ears of the strut and to the bottom bracket. So now that we got the bottom bolt out, we're going to remove the 3 nuts that hold the strut up there on the structure. The hardest one is going to be the one in the back, but we got to take them all 3 out so we can drop and take the strut out of there, so at least it's free from the structures. And for those 3 nuts, we're using a 14 millimeter wrench. So now that we have taken out the bottom bolt, the 3 top nuts that are securing the strut into the frame or the truck, we're going to have to take off the sway bar. So now we have to disconnect the sway bar from right here. We need a 17 millimeter wrench or socket to turn that and loosen it, so we can disconnect the link kit and the sway bar from both sides, and make sure if you got one tire off the ground, the other one has to be off the ground, so there's no tension being sent through the sway bar from one side to another, so that way you don't get hurt. So once we taken out the nut from here, we can lift the sway bar a little bit, and then we can slide off the link kit, so we can put it aside and we can start working on the other side as well. And we take up the driver's side as well. So once you release the sway bar, we're going to have to get it out of the way. And for us to get it out of the way of the strut coming out, we have to disconnect it from here, from the frame, so we can move it out of the way from the strut. But you might have to remove the splash guard. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts that you have to remove to get this sheet metal out of the way, so we can get the bolts in the sway bar out, so we can move it out of the way to get the strut out. Because you got the axle, you can't go back, so we got to go forward to do this, but the sway bar is on the way to move it and slide it on an angle. We got to get the sway bar out of the way. And to take out those bolts, we're using a 12 millimeter socket, the 2 in the front and the ones are hitting right here. As you can see, this is falling off already. So we're gonna take out this bolt and then slide it off. To get this splash guard, once you take out the bolts, you're gonna have to slide it forward to release a tab in the back, drop it, and then once you drop it, you unhook it from the front. So I don't lose bolts. I put them right where they were bolted on, so that way I don't lose bolts, and I know they're right where I need them when I'm putting everything back together. Now that we have the splash guard out, we're gonna have to take off the bracket for the sway bar off so we can drop the sway bar from this side, and we can have this area a little more cleaner because we can't go back because I see the axle. So once we get this out, hopefully we can drop it in an angle and bring it out, because we might be even taking this steering tie rod end off to get the strut out. But we rather do that than messing with a lower control arm and all the symmetry of the suspension. So we just take this out, and hopefully we can just drop it in an angle. So to take out this bolt, they're 14 millimeters. So now that we have loosened them, just leave them there and then start taking them by hand or with a socket out, and you that way you can hold the sway bar and it doesn't fall on you. Now we have the sway bar out, and now we can start working on the strut, taking them out, because there was so much stuff around this. The sway bar was so close to the strut that it wouldn't let us come out this way from the bottom. So now we can push the control arm down, bring it out of where it's sitting on the bottom, and then tilt it and try to bring it out between the rack and pinion and the control arm, and see if that works. If not, we might have to remove this guy here to bring the strut out. But it's better than removing the upper control arm and other components, because then we start messing with the symmetry of the suspension at this point. So, and we don't want to deal with that dry shaft. So first thing we did, we brought it out where it's sitting right there, outwards. And then that you have to push down a little bit on the suspension to release and come out. Now, once you do that, you pull it forward to touch this, and then you're gonna have to start working it downwards between the steering and the control arm. You wanna make sure that you don't tear or rip this boot while you're doing that, because it's gonna be touching this. So you wanna be careful on that. Don't pull, because you might cut this boot, and you don't wanna do that. So now here's the old one that we took out. Here's a new one. So here's a new strut. There's more coils into the spring. And here's the old one. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to take the tie rod end from the steering column off, so we can slide the new strut in, because it's so thick. It's so thick that it won't fit, just like how the other came out. So we're having problems. So we're going to take off this from here so we can install that new strut. You might want to do that from the beginning, but we just figuring that out throughout the process. So we have added WD-40, but we have to remove this clip, and then that way we can undo this nut from here to take this tie rod end from off of here. This is a 19mm nut. So now to pop this tie rod in from here, what we do is we hit this right here. So with the vibration, it pops it, and hopefully we have enough vibration to do that. We're gonna add some WD-40 in there, so it goes in, and with the vibration start losing it. Don't hit it here, because if this is a good one and you don't have to replace this, you're gonna end up replacing it because you tap in here. We tap here with the vibration, hopefully it goes out. You saw that? It won't tap and it came off. Very easy. So now we take it off so we can start fitting in the strut. If the strut comes with new nuts, use the new one, so you start with the fresh hardware as well. So now that we have the strut in there, and then we put it up there with 3 nuts, we just tighten them, and then we are gonna be pushing with the, we're gonna be tapping it with a hammer inwards to set it almost in line with the hole, and then we're gonna have to push down into the suspension to push the bolt through from the back and forward. So that's how it's looking. This is a more tougher strut. Now that we have line up the hole in the bottom, we can tighten in completely the top nuts, and then we can come back and then start taking the bolt through. So now what we can do is we can put our tie rod into the spindle, put the nut in there, just tighten it so it is not flopping around, and we can continue with the strut. So now to guide this bolt in the bottom from the back forward, we're gonna be using a lining up tool like this. So we're gonna go here, we're gonna line up the holes, and then we're gonna push our bolt through so we can line it up and start putting it back together. Now that we have put the bolt through, we can put the washer and the nut that secures this bolt through. So now we have tightened in the upper hardware, the bottom bolt and the hardware as well, the nut with the washer. And now that we have the brand new strut on the passenger side, we put the tie rod in, we tighten it, and we put the securing point, and we go to the driver's side. At this point, we don't put the sway bar because we have one more strut to replace. So instead of putting the old one, we have a stainless steel ones, brand new, and we're installing it. And there it is. Now we can go to the driver's side. So here is the driver's side. We're gonna have to remove the 3 upper nuts on the strut, the bottom bolt. Once we do that, we start taking out the tie rod in from the steering, and we have turned our wheel like you were making a left turn, so we can expose more of it, so it makes it easier. So let's start with removing the hardware on the strut, and then the tie rod in. If the bolt didn't want to come out all the way through, don't worry. All you can do, you can take off all these hardware up there, the nuts, and then everything's gonna relax more, and then the bolt is gonna come out. Don't worry about this right now. Just slowly take off everything. So we recommend these guiding tools, line up tools. So just to put them on or take off components, because this one can move components around while you put one bolt or the equipment into it. Very recommended. Now we can remove the tie rod in a nut. Because we have new of these clips, we cut it so we can take it out easier. So now we take off the hardware completely off on the top, and we pull it outwards from there, and then that's why we release this tie rod end and the sway bar, so it will go forward and come out, because otherwise you have the dry shaft and you can't drop it towards the back, or you have to get rid of the dry shaft and more components. So we just decided to go this route, so we take it off this way. So here they're old one and new one side by side. This one had 300,000 miles, even, and passenger side as well. New one coming in, and here's the problem. Look, this one was making a vibration. It was having a problem on the driver's side, so we installed a new one. Okay, folks, so as soon as you start guiding it in, you put the nut in there with the just hand tightening them, and then now we can come down here, and then we can push down on the suspension from here to push it down, and then guide that into that. It's like a little scoop where it's gonna fall, and then we can start guiding with our tools the hole, so we can put the bolt in there and start tightening in everything. But first, put those up there so the weight of it is being held up there, and it doesn't, you're fighting it down here. So now we can start putting that bolt in there. So what we did initially, we just lined up the hole with our tool from one side like this. And then once we were able to put the bolt halfway through, then we took it out and we start lining it up through here by lifting the bottom of the strut and able to push the bolt through. So now that we did all that, that was pretty easy slide in. So it was easier than the passenger side. Now that we have tightened the 3 nuts in the top, now we can tighten completely the bolt in the bottom. So there it is, the strut is in, upper and bottom piece are completely tightened down. Now we can connect the spindle to the rack and pinion, tie right in, tighten it, and put the locking device into it. We have connected the tie rod in. Now let's put the sway bar back on. One very important thing before you start putting the sway bar back in, bolt it on into the frame, make sure that you put it in the right angle that needs to go, and also put it above the steering column or the rack and pinion to end up here, so you can connect link it, Because if it's hanging, you bolted it onto the frame and then you swing it up, it's gonna hit here and you're not gonna be able to bring it where it needs to be. So it needs to come in here, rest here, bolted it on to the frame, and then you can tighten it in into the link kits. That's the way to go, okay? Now that we have bolted on the sway bar to the frame, we tie in or link it to the sway bar. So before we tighten in one side, we just let it loose and then we set up this one. Once this in, then we can tighten in both sides. So we have put in both struts, and what we did is we tightening up the three nuts in the top, 14 millimeter, the 19 millimeter bolt in the bottom, the 19 millimeter nut for the uh, rack and pinion, tie right in and with a clip, and then we took off the 70 millimeter nut for the sway bar link kit off, and then the four bolts for the sway bar, 14 millimeter. So we put all that back together, we tighten it, and now all we have to do is put the splash guard on the bottom of the scrape plate on, and we're almost done with the replacement of these struts on this Toyota. And well, folks, hopefully this video was useful and helpful how to replace the front struts on a 2003 to 2021 4Runner, on a 2007 to 2014 Toyota FJ, and a 2005 to 2015 Toyota Tacoma. This is for a 4x4, and the procedures for a two-wheel drive is pretty similar, but the parts change. That's what the system said, but the system or the suspension is pretty similar, so this might help you and guide you on how to do that replacement. So with that said, folks, for friends who are watching the video, have to subscribe to our channel. Please subscribe. If you like a video, give us thumbs up, share it, and we'll see you soon with more videos here in el canal de Chano Jose.